This is The Unhappy Millionaire, where entrepreneurs and other top performers discover how to go beyond the bank balance to create thriving, joyful lives. For more, visit theunhappymillionaire.com. And now, on to the show. So Tal, the title of this podcast is The Unhappy Millionaire. And one thing 6 happiness myths that I want to expose and give how we think about it. And the first one, I think, cuts right to the core, which is that happiness is a myth. And what I have in mind is the actor Matthew McConaughey, who's become the philosopher of Hollywood. He made this point, which you'll hear echoed in other versions, which is happiness is this kind of illusion. You think that you'll get some kind of achievement or you'll make some amount of money and then you'll be happy, but really you just desire the next thing. You're on to the next thing. And I'm curious what your reaction is when you hear that.
I woke up this morning and I put Billy Joel, Vienna Waits for You.
I love that song.
Yeah, it's a great song, but it has a line that says, "Only fools are satisfied." And I thought about that as well. That's what we all eat up from a very young age because nobody explicitly says, sit down for a second. I want to explain to you something very important, which is what is the goal of all of this? And then we put this word happiness. It's a big word and everybody gets to interpret it any way they want. And it gets corrupted. It gets assumed by the culture, philosophy that you're brought up to, and you associate the moral compass that they give you as happiness. So you go where the north of the compass is guiding to, and that is happiness. And for McConaughey, that's that. And for the religious person, it's something else, and so on. But if we think scientifically, if we just stop for a second and do the same thing we do when we want to understand something, is to observe what are we talking about. And so if you derive it from observation of organisms in general, and then you reflect that on the human condition, it's just a state of thriving. Now, the state of thriving of us as humans is complicated. You can't see it as easy as you can see it with animals, right? It's not just the bodily situation. We have scars on our body. Are we thin or fat, right? It's more mental and conceptual. This is why it's complicated. It's internal, but it's still objectively a state that is universal, can be taught to everyone as long as you're a human, and just a more complicated path towards it.
Look, I think there is something right about when you achieve a desire, it's not a stopping point where you sit around and I don't desire anything. And that's not what happiness is. Happiness is not, and they lived happily ever after. It's the process of living, which is I'm satisfying one desire and then I'm focused on the next grander ambition that I hold out there. But that doesn't make it a myth. It's that process of achieving more and more values and enjoying that pursuit and achievement of values. And that's why the way I like to think about happiness, it is a state, but it's an ongoing state where you love the living of your life, right? It's not like I've achieved it, I've checked the box, and now I sit around being happy. It's that I sit down and talk to you. This is fun. This is enjoyable. And afterwards, I feel really proud of what we've created. I go on a walk with my girlfriend and we have a great conversation. It's the actual living of a life that's in a good condition that is the core of happiness, rather than a state of nirvana, of nothingness, where I don't have to worry about anything anymore.
The reason why they call it a myth is because if you really don't fully understand it, it's not clear to you what is the path towards it. What are the prerequisites of happiness? What is the outcome of happiness? What does it actually feel to be a happy person? You get a glimpse of it. Then it feels like a myth. It took me many years to understand, when am I happy? Am I happy now? Is it short-term, long-term? Happy because I achieved something, I got the bonus this year, but I really don't enjoy the work. So am I happy? Am I proud? It's always conflicted. And I love the Ayn Rand's definition of the state of uncontradictory joy. And that means so much. The uncontradictory means you have understood the integrated view of happiness and you followed it in an uncontradictory way, which means you were virtuous. You knew exactly what you're going to go for and you did it. There are no contradictions. It's fully integrated, fully experienced in its achievement of pursuing your rational values that are in a way derived by a lot of thinking, a lot of self-introspection. So that's why it feels like a myth. And it feels misunderstood to a lot of people coming from different perspectives and philosophies.
The quote from Rand, I think, really captures something really important. When you're unhappy, you're in a state of conflict. It's I want this and I don't have it, or I want this, but I want that. And I'm pulled in different directions. I'm at war with myself. I'm at war with other people. I'm at war with reality. And it's that harmony of, no, I'm on a trajectory where everything's working together in a positive direction and I'm loving it. It doesn't mean that you don't have specific challenges, that you don't have little frustrations, but that overall course of thriving, as you said, your life is going in the right direction.
One more conflict that I think is very deep. I think I want something, I'm going about getting it, but I don't feel it. Hard work and the heavy lifting that a lot of people don't know how to do because we're not taught to be introspective. It's like, why am I not deriving the kind of pride and self-esteem and joy from doing this? I thought it'll be great. And it's the fallacy of second-handedness. You haven't checked that being a lawyer was not really yours. It was an expectation. You're good at being a lawyer, but there's something conflicted from the inside. My feelings are not aligned. Sometimes the conflict is very deep. Do you really know who you are? Do you really know what you want? What you want? Only you can know that. That is the complicated state of being a human and being objectively you in the sense that you are pursuing the things that truly bring meaning to your life, truly are yours, you're excited about. The inner knowledge of there's harmony between who I am, the nature of my consciousness and what it reacts to in the world and the values it wants to pursue and my actions.
I want us to do an episode on how to want. I mean that seriously. I think it's a skill to develop. But let's move on to the second happiness myth. And this is the idea that you can just will yourself into happiness, that happiness is just a decision. I'm going to think positively about my life. I'm going to just directly choose to be happy, and then I'm happy.
I mean, open any self-help book, someone who read some Zen Buddhism, and it's an inner state. Forget about the world. I mean, it's materialistic. It's all about the truth is happiness is an inner state, but not devoid and not detached from reality. It's an integration of the inner world and the outside world, fully working in harmony. You expressing your inner world, your thoughts, your desires, your passions outside into the world, and the world gives you feedback that then you take in, and it's a spiral between the in and the out. And I think cutting the world into two, which is what they do, is like meditate, wake up in the morning, feel happy, smile. I see a lot of characters out there in the world, especially older in their lives. It's like I've tried everything, nothing worked. I really can decide to be happy. I'm happy today. You cannot do anything to make me unhappy. And they just walk around with a stupid smile on their face, pretending to be happy and joyful, and then they collapse. That's a very shallow view of happiness.
Yeah, you wouldn't say, well, you just decide to be healthy. You can make a decision to take healthful actions, right? But you can't just choosing to be healthy. And if you think about happiness as health writ large, health in every respect in your life, including psychological health, the idea that you could just will it without action. The other example that comes to mind for me is one crucial component of happiness, which is self-esteem. And there's some people that say, well, self-esteem is just telling yourself, I'm amazing, I'm amazing, I'm amazing. But the reality is that you've done certain things that you judge as either worthy, admirable, good, or bad. And you can't just decide to have a certain opinion of yourself. You have to build that opinion through action. You have to actually do things that give you a sense of self-confidence and self-worth. And that's true of happiness across the board. I do think this myth captures something right, which is you do have to set yourself that purpose. I'm going to commit myself to happiness. It doesn't happen by accident, but then you have to take action.
Exactly. And it's kind of interesting that the same character who say, I'm going to will myself to happiness, when they get cancer, they say, okay, let me meditate and move energy in my body. The same mystical view, rationalistic view of reality. It needs to be objective, which I think leads us to the next myth, right? Happiness is not a subjective state. It's not something that who knows what it is. It's different. Your happiness is not my happiness. So let's introduce the third myth, right? Happiness is subjective.
Yeah. And I mean, you hear this all the time. I've heard it since I was a little kid. And like most myths, again, I think there's something right about it. That is, happiness is very personal and it involves things that are going to be different for you than for me. We're not going to fall in love with the same career. We're not going to fall in love with the same person. Hopefully, that create a massive conflict. But there's all these differences, but there's certain universal fundamentals that human happiness requires in the same way that there are certain universals, like of health. Human beings require a certain amount of nourishment. They require a certain amount of sleep. They require shelter and a certain range of temperature. There's certain universal requirements, even if you like it slightly warmer than I do and you need less sleep than I do. There are differences, but there's certain universal principles that we need to identify that are objective, that are provable. And it's only within those then that there's optionality for the specific form that your career takes or the specific form that your relationships take.
Exactly. And there's two things that we need to separate: method and content. The method is objective and universal. The content is a preference. You can call it subjective. I don't think it's the right word. You and I had a discussion once and you said, yeah, it's subjectivity versus preference, which is exactly what it is. So the method by which we humans achieve happiness is universal. And it's the same way. If you look at animals again, both the method and the content are the same. But the complexity of the human condition is that it's hard to see the method because it's conceptual, which is our means of survival. It is objective. It could be discovered, and it is discovered with the realm of knowledge called philosophy. The content is yours. It's completely yours. Nobody will ever be a human like you are. The set of preferences that you have is completely unique. It's actually what makes you you. When I ask someone, who are you? They can give me the demographics or they can describe their preferences, their values. And that's how you know them, because there's no way to open their mind, look inside and see the neurons that are them. It manifests itself through the preferences. Oh, you're the guy that like racing and drumming and you like those abstract ideas and you prefer this and you prefer that and you like chocolate more than vanilla, right? So I think the reason why people confuse happiness as subjective is that they don't understand there are two levels here. One is method and the other one is content. And it is objective in both because the content is a reflection of your objective consciousness. Your consciousness is different, and it's an interesting thing because you develop it over time. It's objective in both method and content. The question is, are you deep enough to discover both?
So the way I use subjective means that it's essentially whatever I feel like. I don't need to arrive at knowledge through a process. I don't need to arrive at my values through a process. It's whatever I want this week, a completely arbitrary seat of your pants approach to life and decision making. And as you pointed out, that's very different from saying I'm following a rigorous method and reaching definable conclusions, some of which are very personal to me and they would be different to you. And that gets blended together in the way that people will use subjective. And indeed, psychologists will often define happiness as subjective well-being. And it really has both, they're packaging both elements together. It's subjective in a sense I would agree with. It's referring to your sense of your own well-being. I thought I was miserable, but it turns out I was happy all along. We're talking about your own experience of your life, but it's not subjective in the other sense of it's whatever makes me happy. If I say that I'm happy being a serial killer and manipulating other people, taking heroin and cocaine and whatever, then who are you to say that I'm not happy? No, I will say you are not happy, whatever you say, because your life is not going in a positive, life-promoting direction.
Yeah, it comes from a subjective view of morality in general, and happiness is the end of morality. I love this Leonard Peikoff lecture called Certainty and Happiness. He says certainty is the end of epistemology, and happiness is the end of morality. So if your epistemology, the way you know the world, is contradicted, it has problems in it, then you will never achieve certainty. And if your morality is subjective, is morality tells you to either follow orders from someone above or do whatever you feel, then you won't end up with objective happiness. And both are true. I mean, you need to know how to know and you need to know how to live in order to get to that state.
And I want to underline this idea that morality is centrally involved in thinking about happiness. And that's been true since the dawn of philosophy, that If you look at the Greeks, particularly Aristotle, Aristotle's assessment was people viewed in his ethics. Everybody basically agrees that the end goal of life is happiness. And then we have all kinds of debates on what happiness is and how to achieve it. But that happiness was a deeply philosophic issue, and you had to think about it from a philosophic framework. But today, there's a widespread view, and this gets us into a myth I'm really eager to talk about, happiness myth 4. Psychologists know what makes us happy. And the idea here is that to be scientific about happiness, what we need to do is rely on psychologists. And for those who don't know, there's a whole literature called happiness studies. And what it essentially involves is they'll go around and do surveys of people and ask them, like, are you happy? Or sometimes they'll have rating systems. You'll have to answer 30, 50 questions, and you'll be categorized as more or less happy. I want to talk about those questionnaires in a little bit. And then they do statistical regressions to say happiness is associated with giving to charity and having a pet and seeing your friends 3 times a week. And it's associated with making money, but only up to $70,000. After that, happiness isn't affected. Oh yeah, the latest study shows that actually you can get happier after $70,000. So this is the scientific approach to happiness. And those old philosophers like Aristotle and Ayn Rand, they don't know what they're talking about. They're not being scientific.
Yeah, they're hijacking science in a way, because science is a method and they're violating the method. They go around asking people what they feel as the primary. That's the reality. And they don't understand that it's much deeper than this. It's like I want to build a rocket ship and I go ask people, what do you think a rocket ship should look like? What do you feel when it launches? What are you talking about? We are studying reality. We're studying the complicated thing, that the phenomenon called human consciousness and the human state. And this is what philosophy does scientifically, starting from observation and deriving hypotheses. And there's a lot of debate in philosophy. I'm angry with psychology because I think the whole, if you're going to call it the science, is corrupt. I mean, they've never defined what they're trying to achieve. You ask any 2 psychologists, what does success look like? And they'll give you different answers. So you know it's corrupt from the core of building some kind of what I call engineering on a physics that doesn't exist. So this is, my daughter is now learning Introduction to Psychology in high school. And she says, and there's this methodology, and this methodology, and this contradicts that, and that contradicts that. And as a psychologist, you can choose wherever method you like. And I asked her, does it sound reasonable that you can come from contradicting approaches, behaviorism and whatever the other ism is, she has like 16 of them, or humanism. You choose your path as a psychologist and you practice and you trying things on people. Then 3 years into your psychotherapy, after you shelled off tens of thousands of dollars, it's like, I've done everything I could. Like you said, if you translate that to the material kind of domain, it's just ridiculous. It's going to a witch doctor who says, I'll try things on you. I don't know why it works, if it works. I don't know where it's coming from. Freud said so. The real answer is the science that studies the human condition is philosophy. Philosophy itself is mostly corrupted by people who are trying to make it non-objective. But if you follow the good philosophers, if you follow the ones that make sense and present a non-contradictory set of ideas, then you will learn a lot about the state of the human condition. And from there, derive, and psychology needs to be a science. It's the transition between the universal to the individual. Your state of being. What do you want? Who are you? What kind of emotions are you experiencing? And why? Do you have errors in your thinking? Let's fix it together. Let me help you as a psychologist introspect and get to the bottom of why you're feeling anxious about this. Why are you blocked about that? Why you don't know what you want? Why do you feel frustrated in your marriage? There's a real need for psychologists. But it's just that you see, it's mostly hit or miss. Some psychologists are good because they're good, rational humans, and they do what makes sense to them. They're not leaning on a solid science.
Yeah, and I have a high opinion of a lot of psychology if you looked at from this perspective, which is there's incredible tools and knowledge available, usually to deal with certain defined problems. There's a lot known about what to do when people face depression, what to do when people grapple with anxiety, and anxiety disorders. Yeah. So there's a lot of powerful tools, but notice that they're mostly on solving a negative. And indeed, I mentioned these surveys to decide if you're happiness. One of the most widespread used ones is the Oxford Survey of Happiness. I'm probably getting the title a little bit wrong, but it's something Oxford. And if you look at the actual questions, some of those elements that they're asking about are somewhat related to happiness. Some of them I don't think are correlated with happiness. One is that something like, are you never bored, or does everything interest you? I'm definitely bored because I have a high threshold for what matters to me, what's interesting to me, and I try to build my life to avoid those boring contexts and boring situations. The basic issue is this: precisely because happiness is a holistic view of a thriving life, you have to take a real moral stand on what is a thriving life. What does it mean to live a good life? And that is not a question that psychology can answer. And indeed, there are philosophic assumptions in how psychologists approach their work that are, in effect, say, we're not allowed to answer that question. That's not an empirical question. That's not something that we can do a survey on and use statistics to answer. And so we don't take a view on it. And so what it, in effect, becomes is subjectivism. We're trying to talk about happiness, but happiness is whatever our subjects that we're studying say it is. We're not going to take a stand. And it just becomes a whole big mess. But none of that is to deny that they can come up with powerful tools, but they can't answer the central question, which is, what kind of life should I try to build if I want to enjoy the living of my life? That's a moral issue.
Exactly. Think about a session of a psychologist with a 16 or 18-year-old who's feeling depressed and lost, where they can give them a positive, but they can only say, I can handle your anxiety. I can try to get you back on your feet. What do you do when you get back on your feet? I have no idea. I'll just wait for you to get anxious again and then charge you by the hour. It happens actually in the material sciences as well, in medicine as well. There's no positive view of what the positive looks like, what it needs to be, because then you're taking a moral stance, and that's the dangerous part. Who wants to argue about philosophy and morality?
Well, speaking of moral stance, here's happiness number 5. Happiness comes from serving a cause greater than yourself.
Happiness myth, you mean? Happiness myth number 5, yeah.
Oh my gosh. We hear this all the time. And in our first episode, where we talked about the way in which you can be successful financially, building a business and so on, and be unhappy, one of the things we mentioned was the way in which that's often attributed to, well, you're unhappy because you've been too selfish, you've been too focused on you. And genuine happiness comes from setting that aside, serving something more important than you, more important than your life.
Well, we talked about the relationship between morality and happiness. Morality needs to guide you to happiness. And that's coming from one of those moralities that reverse things around. It's a primitive attempt to tell people how to live their lives from a worldview that was tyrannical, it was anti-human, and it was designed to control people. And the masters who designed this type of morality knew very well how to manipulate morality and to turn people against themselves in order to be really easily controlled. It's really the idea that your life is not about you. It's about something else, something external. You turn people against themselves because you say it's not you, it's something out there. And because it's something you cannot really achieve, then I get to tell you what that other thing is. It could be God, it could be the collective, it could be the tribe, it could be the king, but it's not you. And once I plant this idea that your moral compass leads to that thing, then everything you do every day is to achieve that thing. The bad news is it's false. It's non-scientific, it's non-objective, and this is why it ends up with blood, honestly, eventually.
Well, and I think you named something that's really important there. This idea of a compass is, if your goal is happiness, then you're getting constant feedback from reality of, am I on the right track or not on the right track? That compass won't give you all the instructions you need on how to get to genuine happiness, but it'll tell you if you're falling short. But if you set the goal as serving something instead of your happiness, serving something outside of your happiness, then you've lost any kind of feedback. And indeed, what people often say, there's a really pivotal scene in Ayn Rand's novel, The Fountainhead, where there's a young woman who's been taught, no, your moral duty is to serve a cause greater than yourself. And she comes to her mentor and says, I'm doing it. I'm working with all these poor people and I don't feel good. I feel actually dirty. And he says, well, what do you think you're supposed to feel? You're still too selfish. You think that serving others should make you happy. Why are you putting your happiness as important? And it's crushing that compass that says this young woman is feeling like, I'm destroying my life and myself. Instead of that being a warning signal of I need to go in a different path, you should not pay attention to your enjoyment of life. And so the idea that the way to be happy is to stop aiming at your own happiness, it's ludicrous, but you're right. I think it's the people who spread it often have an agenda. Yeah, if you're not serving your happiness, you'll do as I say and you'll obey my orders.
And it's so sad to see the results of that conflict. I watch tennis a lot. I really love tennis. You see this guy dedicated his life to tennis since he was like 6 years old, and he's working as hard as humanly possible. And he wins a game. And then he does the cross and points to the sky, gives the pride for the win to God. But in the middle of the match, when he misses a shot, he slams the racket on his knee that you see, and actually he bled one time. It creates a split where the good is out there. Someone else is responsible for all the good that I get. All the evil is within me. And think about Christianity for a minute. In a way, that's what it is. And you're torturing people. You're condemning them for a life of misery and an awful way of perceiving yourself. All my religious friends who make as much money as they can on the weekends and then go repent it on the weekend and give the money away to the good people who tell us what good is, because I'm not good. We're all sinners. Devastating. That's what it is.
And I like to search for what's the grain of truth. This one is a little bit harder because I don't think there really is a grain in truth. But to the extent that I think people find it plausible, an important aspect of it is that they think the alternative is satisfying whatever momentary desire you happen to have. And I do think that in order to achieve happiness, you do need to live for something. But what you're living for is a moral ideal. It's an ideal vision of what a happy human life looks like. It's a hard thing to achieve. It's building a certain character. It's living a virtuous life of honesty and independence and justice and pride. It's building a career and navigating a career path that is really challenging and enjoyable. It's finding and building relationships that are healthy and positive and that add to your life. That is really hard work. And you do need to have an aspirational vision of, yeah, this is what a good life looks like that I'm trying to live up to. But it's a life that I want to live up to, a life that's good for me, that allows me to get the most out of my time on earth. Let me set aside what I want, what I personally care about, what I find valuable in order to be an obedient serf.
How you go around traveling the world, and sometimes the main attraction is a church, and you go to those amazing churches filled with art, and the content of the inspiration for all that beauty is completely corrupt to the core. But what they got right is the inspirational aspect, the sense of awe. I'm always thinking, what if we build those beautiful churches for the real grandeur of the human mind and celebrate the inspiration with art and sculptures and beauty that actually the church got really right. They've mastered and chained people by creating that sense of awe and inspiration to something big and wonderful and inspirational. That they got right, but the content they've poured into it is anti-human.
So let's turn to the final happiness myth. Number 6, career success will make you happy. And this is the one I'm closest to sympathetic with, because I think we both agree if you are miserable in your career, you can't be happy. It's such a central part of what makes life great to live and unlocks your ability to pursue all the other values that you want from life. I know you like racing, drumming. You don't have any money. Those are hard hobbies to keep up with. But even just that most of your hours are spent on work. And if those hours are miserable, you've got a real problem. But I still don't think that put that way, that career success will make you happy, that it's exactly right. What's your take?
If I studied with a professor, a physics professor in university, and he was just amazing. So he would lead us in the lessons to a conclusion, and then he says, but it's more complicated than that. And then the next lesson, he will lead us to a deeper conclusion. He said, yes, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. And the whole course was like, oh, we thought we got it. And then, no, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And the same with career and success. Go ahead and be successful, make the money, get more leverage and more decision power. Or if you want to be an artist, a singer, yeah, get the fame that comes with it. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's an integration of several things that amount to a state of being that is manifesting yourself in different domains, pursuing different types of values, all coming together. And if you do that one-dimensionally, actually, you can make several mistakes. One is go for the money, go for the fame, go for the power, and then betray what you really love. That's one mistake. Another mistake is to find what you love and do only that for the rest of your life, suffering and slaving just to serve one dimension of your life. That's another mistake. There are different ways to go wrong about it. I think a full, happy life is seeing everything that the world has to offer you, like a beautiful buffet of possibilities. Like you said, I think productive pursuit is the central purpose of one's life because of who we are and mainly what we do and how we sustain ourselves, which is to produce. But around it, there's so many other things. The relationship in your life, there's the love, the romantic love, there's everything you do for rejuvenation and recreation. This is why we call it recreation, because you have to create. It's like a muscle, try to go to the gym and work the muscle till failure. And then what? What do you have to do? You have to go and rest. You have to let it rebuild itself. You have to rejuvenate. And the same with our mind. So seeing who we are objectively and the nature of our consciousness allows you to see the fact that values need to be multidimensional. You have to have relationship values. You have to have health and rejuvenation values, rest, if you like, going hiking, reading books, doing something that is not necessarily directly productive. And when you go and produce, make sure that what you're producing is what brings meaning to your life. And waking up in the morning and working for 10 hours straight feels like fun and joy, energetic, rather than a drudgery. So it's a little bit more complicated than that.
What I often see among highly successful superstar performers is they really do love work, and that's where they feel most in control, most satisfied. But what happens is if they don't attend to the other parts of their lives, they start escaping into work. And when you escape into work, the rest of your life becomes bad, but your work life becomes bad because it becomes, instead of a source of joy that you're engaged in, it's a compulsive escape. And you often will take on too much, perform it too frantically, and lose sight of what am I in this for? And so I think that's a real risk to people who do love work as a realm in their lives, that you can even corrupt your love of work if you don't attend to the other things that life has to offer.
In a way, in the Silicon Valley, you see a lot of people that sanctify hardships, the hard things about the hard things. By the way, it's a great book. I really recommend it. But there's an element of you have to suffer. It has to be painful. And it's a little bit more complicated than that because there's a grain of truth to that. And the more complicated is that you want to go after audacious goals and things that feel like a real stretch to your capabilities. And some of it is the nature of achievement, which is strain. And sometimes the heroic journey has a valley of despair in it because there's a stretch, because there's something big that you're going after that you can't even see that you're capable of from where you stand. But a value-oriented perspective says, I'm doing this for myself. This is all a joyful journey. And I understand the nature of the journey, even if some of it feels hard. Even if I created this company to create rocket ships that go to the moon, I still have to do the taxes. And you understand that it's all for the sake of going in the direction that you find inspiring. Fully integrated, we may be going back to this idea of non-contradictory joy, is how you want to perceive. And if it feels contradictory, or I work too much, I feel exhausted. Oh, there's some contradiction here. What are you not understanding in your relationship with work? Do you define success in the right, deep way? Is it just taking your company to an IPO and then everything will be fine? No, it's, again, too shallow. Like my physics professor said, a little bit more complicated.
He's Tal Tzavani, I'm Don Watkins, and this has been The Unhappy Millionaire. Ready to take the next step in your journey? Visit theunhappymillionaire.com where you can find powerful resources for building a life that you love and details on how you can work with Tal and me.